What's up, guys? It's Crazy Radiate here, and we are making another deck here on Arcadeck, and this one is a bit different. It's something that I've never done before, and it was actually challenging. I used Elrond, Master of Healing, as my commander. Now, what makes this deck kinda challenging is the mechanic that I used, which was Scry. Now, when you make a deck solely on the subject of scrying, it can be rather challenging. And scrying, what that is, if you don't know, scry is if you play a card that says scry 1, you would look at the top card of your library. You can either keep it on the top of your library or you put it on the bottom of the library. And to me, that's a type of card advantage. Even though you're not drawing that card, it kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to be drawing, or you can determine if you don't want to do it. Unlike Surveil is you look at the top card of your library, you can either leave it there or put it in your graveyard. But scrying, it was kind of difficult to find cards at first that was around scrying, because to make a deck to where you get advantage from scrying can be difficult. However, the Lord of the Rings set they come out with had several cards that use the scry mechanic, which obviously I didn't use all scrying. I also had one of my favorite creatures in Magic the Gathering, which is ooze. I did put some ooze creatures in there, but the main mechanic was scrying. And the way I was able to make this, yes, it says it's a tier 2 bracket, it's a bracket 2 commander deck, and is it powerful? Not really. I'm not going to say it's powerful, but it does the job. It does make for an interesting gameplay. Obviously, there's some decks that you can't play against with Elrond, just because, I mean, come on. There's only so much that I have been able to see that you can do with scrying. Yes, you are putting +1/+1 counters on everything, and there is an artifact that I have in the deck that allows you to do it twice. However, if you're playing against a deck that has a lot of flyers in it, you're going to have your creatures to be humongous. Now, this card here, the Tatiova, it does turn your lands into 3/3 elementals, which does help, and they do have flying, but that's just one card. And I didn't want to get away from the scry mechanic too much. I did want to add a few things in there, just like right here you got Ave, Progenitor Ooze, but I wanted to stick with the mechanic of scrying because it's challenging. It's challenging to make something like that, and that's what I love about Magic the Gathering, is the fact that you can create 100 decks and they all do something different. And is this technically card advantage? Not really. Card advantage is when you draw cards and you're getting cards in your hand. So no, it's not technically card advantage, but it's, can you say it's value? Yes, it is value, because you do put +1/+1s on everything. Well, well, the way Elrond works is if you scry 2, you can put 2 +1/+1 counters divided among 2 creatures. So you can put a +1/+1 on Elrond, or you can put a +1/+1 on the Scavenging Ooze, or you can just put 2 +1/+1s on Elrond. Yes, they can get excessively big rather quickly, but if you don't have a way of protecting those creatures, then all those +1/+1s are for nothing. And this is one of those decks I'm probably not going to do much work on. I could, because I know there's some cards out there that if a creature dies that has +1/+1s on it, that it deals that much damage to a target creature, or you can gain that much life, or it deals that much damage. So there is ways of making this an excessively powerful deck. However, the way I made it, to me, is just, it's good the way it is. I like the way it is. I have 2 decks that I keep that are on the verge, might as well say they're Commander Bracket 1. And one of them is Elrond, and then the other one is another Lord of the Rings themed deck. It's an orc deck. Have some Nazgul in it and all that. And whenever I play Elrond, normally if I'm playing with my brother, that's the decks that we use if I'm going to use Elrond, because Elrond can't really stand up against anything else because everything else is pretty tough. But this deck was fun to make. It took me probably about a week. Once I got started to make this, I had to do a lot of research on this deck to find cards that would work. Because, like I said, you need to have counter spells, but at the same time, you need to have spells off so that allow you to scry. Because if you don't, then you're just relying on creatures to scry. And I wanted multiple ways of scrying. Because if you don't, then, just like this opt. You scry one, draw a card. Now, yes, that is card advantage. You get to look at the top card of your library, see if you want to draw that. If not, put it on the bottom of your library. Then you draw the next card. You don't get to look at it until you draw it. And this is a fun deck. It is a fun deck. This is one of those decks that I probably wouldn't take to a local game store, an LGS. I wouldn't, just because the pod that I used to play with, they had some really powerful decks, and I know for a fact that Elrond would not be able to hold up against them. There's no way he could hold up against them. I even had difficulty holding up against them whenever I took my Locust God deck. And my Locust God deck is powerful, excessively powerful. And now, there's some places that they have a set bracket that they play with, which is actually a good thing. You tell everybody, hey, tonight we're gonna, let's all bring, bracket 3 decks. Let's not go above it. Try not to bring anything below it so everything's evened out. And most time when I was going to the game store, we had our own little group. There was 4 of us that had roughly the same bracket on our decks that we would play against each other, which if we had something that was a bit stronger, we'd tell them, hey, I've got this, are y'all okay if I play it? You kind of want to warn somebody before you start playing a really powerful deck, because you don't want somebody, coming in that's playing an Eldrazi or a Slither deck, and you have no idea, and you're playing a Commander Bracket 2 deck, and next thing you know, boom, they popped out a Sliver with a Sliver Hive Lord as their commander, and they're throwing slivers out, and the game lasts for about 5 minutes. You don't want that. You want it to be fun. And normally whenever we played our games, for the most part, lasted in between, because there's 4 of us, it would last between about 45 minutes to an hour. There were times, this is when it got real interesting, there were times that it would go above an hour, and the longest that we ever played was we played for about 2 hours. And this is what I was talking about when you need to tell them, hey, this is the deck that I'm going to play with. I took my Locust God deck after I had got it up to it was a Commander Bracket 3 at that time, on the verge of being a 4. And I told them, hey, I've got this deck, do y'all mind if I play it? And then they pulled theirs out, because we took different ones, we didn't just take one. And we played for about 2 hours. That was a fun game. Now, Elrond, I never took Elrond. I don't think I had made Elrond whenever I was going to the gaming store. I don't believe so. With the group that I played with, I wouldn't have taken Elrond. Not because Elrond's not a good commander and that it can't become a good deck, but because he's just, the way it is right now, he's not strong enough to be able to handle anything higher. Now see, this is the card I was telling you about. This card here allows you, when Elrond is triggered, it triggers again. So you can get double the scry counters off of that. And there's other cards that allow you to do that, obviously, but this is the only one that I had at the moment. This right here, the Temporal Anchor, is also a good one. At your upkeep, you scry 2, and I love this card. And when you at your upkeep, you scry 2, and when you put those 2 top cards, if you're not going to keep them, if you put the 2 top cards on the bottom of your library, you pull the bottom 2 cards out and you exile them, and you can play those during your turn. I love that card because if you're not drawing lands, or if you scry and you see that there's lands and you know on the bottom is lands, you can pull them out, exile them, and you can play that land for turn, and you still get to draw a card. That's card advantage, and that's also value. It's a really great way, and that's one of my favorite cards in this deck. And imagine if you had a couple of those. If you had ways of copying that enchantment, and if you had ways of copying that enchantment, then you would have multiple scry triggers, and at that point, then you would have massive creatures. And then you just saw a card that was an artifact and equipment that said the creature can only be blocked by walls. Well, if nobody's playing walls, you can put all the +1/+1s, or most of the +1/+1s on a certain creature, put it on it. It can't be blocked except by walls, and you can win the game. You could put that on Elrond, and this is where you need to have counters so that whenever someone goes to play something, you can counter it to protect Elrond, because 20 commander damage, that's the end of the game. So you could do that. There's multiple ways that you can use Elrond here, and the way I've got it, like I said, is not very strong. It's not very strong at all. It does have, like I said, my favorite creatures, which are oozes. I don't know why. First time I ever saw an ooze creature, I fell in love. I don't know why. I need to make an ooze deck just because how much I love oozes. I don't know why. It's weird. I guess because it looks like snot or boogers. But all in all, do I recommend you making this deck? Yes, I recommend you making this deck. However, I do recommend, this is also a really good card, because if you're charged, you can give a creature flying until end of turn. I do recommend, however, if you're going to make this deck, work on it. Really work on it. Make it more powerful. Make it to where you can have multiple triggers. And this right here also gives your creatures +1/+1. It's a great card. Of course, it only has a minus ability, and so I use that as more of an enchantment than I do a planeswalker. And now there's other cards you can use. You can spend more money on the deck if you want to. It's like I've said in the past, I don't put a lot of money in decks just because I want it to be affordable. I don't want to put a video on here, or I don't want to put multiple videos on here of a deck going, hey, y'all need to build this deck, and I've spent, and to me this is expensive, over $100 on the deck. That's everything. That's the creatures, instants, enchantments, sorceries, artifacts, and lands. I'm not going to do that. To me, there's no need in paying that much for a deck when you can spend less to make a deck just as good, if not better. And now here, let me show you this. This right here, these are, it taps for a green or a blue. I love multicolored lands. All my decks, I try to have at least, and this might be excessive, I try to have at least 10 multicolored decks. For some reason, I always keep 37 lands in my deck. That's what I keep in my deck, 37 lands. But for some reason, I have the most difficult time drawing lands. I don't know why. No matter how good I shuffle it, or it don't matter. I have a difficult time getting lands. When you have these 2-color, and sometimes if you're running a 3-color deck, sometimes you can get one that has 3 colors. these dual lands, that's the name of it, dual lands. I was trying to figure out the name of it, dual land. These dual lands are excessively helpful. And they also, like this one, allows you whenever it comes into the, when it goes into the battlefield, you gain a life. But I try to have dual lands in all my decks, at least 10, because that way, if you are having difficulty, let's say you're playing a red, white, blue deck, and you've got red and white on the field, but you're not drawing blue. At least if you have, Evolving Wilds, that also helps. Terramorphic Expanse, that also helps. But if you have these dual lands, you have a better chance of getting all your colors kind of early on. Now, I forgot to set the commander here. Yeah, but if you see it, it shows that it's 80? Mine would say $80. We're just gonna say $80 according to Arcadeck. Now, when I look for cards, oh, I'm so sorry. Excuse me. Whenever I look for cards, I go to Card Kingdom and I go to TCG Player, and I see which is cheaper. Most of the time, I buy my cards on Card Kingdom because a majority of the cards are about 35 cents each. And that's all that I need to spend is 35 cents on a card. I mean, it's not, unless you want to go, buy the real expensive cards, you're more than welcome to. But I try to keep my decks below $100. I do have, of course, my, like I showed you, my Locust God deck. It's not less than $100 by no means. But I try not to spend a whole bunch of money. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and if y'all do make this deck, y'all let me know. Tell me how it does, and y'all have good now.